I was at Bookstand in Beaumont looking for some lost classics, and I stumbled across a massive number of underground books taunting me, reminding me that I needed to review this game. I have been putting this off for a while, mainly because my life has been consumed with other projects that actually pay money, but those projects are done and I'm out of excuses. So in this Mad Musings, we're going to talk about Mayfair's dark future superhero mashup, Underground. I'm Mr. Welch, and let's pump ions. In the grim dark darkness of the early 90s, RPGs had the constant theme of how edgy can you get. White Wolf was the new hotness, and everybody decided that happy-go-lucky games were for kids, and everyone tried to outdo each other with the depressing games. Everything was either dystopian, borderline horror, or generally set in a less than pleasant game world. Mayfair's Underground, written by Ray Winninger, decided that they were all too optimistic for its taste and released a superhero game with built-in PTSD, insane superheroes, mass-marketed cannibalism, Nazi Scientologists, and Keynesian economics. It was dark times indeed, my friends. The game was obviously inspired by the comic book Marshal Law by Kevin O'Neill and Pat Mills. That was published just a few years previous. In that comic, the world had gone to hell. The government discovered how to create superheroes to fight in a war very similar to Vietnam. Of course, the heroes don't win, and the government turns their back on them and just dumps them on the street, despite not knowing how to deal with all these new superpowers. And those are the more optimistic parts of the story. How does this tie into Underground? Well, that synopsis I just gave you, apply it to Underground, word for word. All Mayfair did was shave off the serial numbers. So you have probably surmised in Underground you're playing a superhero in a crapsack world where you have mental problems and superpowers but no outlet to use them. The government is corporately sponsored, and since food is scarce, one of the biggest food chains sells vat-grown cloned people for meat. Not sure why they wouldn't do cloned cows, but then it wouldn't be dark and edgy, I guess. The same companies also have vat-grown people that work for them with less than average IQ, so they will be happy with less, and that also require an enzyme to survive they can only get from their employer's food. Because computers are now created with human brains for processing speed, people can actually sell their brains and get artificial brains that make them happier watching specific TV shows made just for those brains. So yes, this game is pretty bleak. Character generation mixes the priority emphasis you get from Shadowrun with the absolute randomness you get from Traveler. This is one of the games where you can die in creation if you're not careful, or even if you are careful and you just have terrible luck. You have a budget to make your superhero. You can spend money on more stats, more superpowers, better training, or buy a lot of therapy to try to reduce the downsides of your superhero powers. This is done with a random roll against the difficulty of your powers. If you roll well, you get all the benefits and very little drawbacks. Roll badly, and your character eats their 30mm pistol before the game even starts. The randomness of the character creation was one of the biggest drawbacks of the game, and the luck requirement meant you could build two identical characters, have one absolutely useless while the other one becomes overpowered based on the results of only a single die roll. There's a lot of superpowers in the game, and as you would expect, and of course every one of them drives you insane. Most of the powers just turn you into a psychotic murderer, but others give you multiple personalities, paranoia, or manic depression, to name a few. The more powerful your abilities are, the crazier you are, unless of course you ace the therapy roll at the beginning, in which case these are more than just like minor inconveniences. Once you've got your powers and your skills, then you get to go be a vigilante with your fellow superheroes. That's as far as most people get because the rules get pretty convoluted after this. The rules for Underground are what a lot of people remember the most. Being a Mayfair RPG, it reused the DC superhero system, which was exponential. If you had a strength of 1 and I had a strength of 3, I wasn't 3 times as strong as you, I was 4 times as strong as you. Each instance doubled from the previous. So if I raise my strength to 4, now I'm 8 times as strong as you. And then another point makes me 16 times as strong as you. And so on. The issue is all the mechanics use blocks like this for everything, including weight, distance, size, even time. For a lot of things, it's just easier to eyeball how tough the roll is, rather than figure out how many blocks it takes to travel from one city to another city in what block of time. For a lot of people, it came across as needlessly complicated compared to games like Marvel Superheroes. The other mechanic that a lot of people didn't care for was everything was dueling dice. You want to pick up a rock? Well, it's time for you and the GM to dice off. Roll 2d10, add all the bonuses, and hope you roll higher than the rock. You roll off for literally everything. Combat, research, seduction, trying to remember what somebody's name is, and then it's just dueling dice time. The better you do, the more you remember, but you can't be sure the DM didn't roll double aught and you got bested by that rock. That got tedious quick. Now, the mechanic a lot of people did like was the economic improvement, except for my college lab partner who happened to be an economics major. Every body of government had its own stats, things like corruption, quality of life, take-home pay, taxes, social services, etc. The higher the number, the better life was. Being a dark future game, you didn't have a lot of double-digit numbers in those categories. But the party could spend their own XP to raise these numbers, at least temporarily. So everybody decides to convince the government to lower taxes on the middle class, and your local neighborhood gets to keep a little bit more of their take-home pay. This has the effect of raising one linked stat and reducing another, so you might see a bit more of your paycheck, but then the government shuts down all the free clinics. Because in this world, the government provides everything and independent charity doesn't apparently exist. This is just a temporary fix, mind you. Eventually those numbers revert back, so all of your XP is wasted after about, I guess, a month. You can make it permanent by spending a lot of XP to make sure of this, and you can spend even more XP to cancel the negative effect. It gives the PC something to work together on, though the XP cost to actually make a long-term positive effect is really expensive. There's a lot of books for this game's setting, and most of them are still list price. The most unusual was the notebook, which was like this lengthwise 3-ring binder that held single sheets of papers for the different NPCs, agencies, locations, and other cheat sheets for the underground setting. The book was weirdly sized, so it didn't fit into your bookshelf, and so it just had to sit on top of it. A lot of the other books in the box set added more pages to the notebook, so at least they supported that. The rest of the books included the player's guide with more options, another kind of player's guide, 2 tech guides and gear guides, a guide to DC, which makes you long for the civility and integrity we are blessed with today, a box set for LA, and a lunar source book. These aren't hard to find, and there's not a large markup on them either. The game was trying to capture the zeitgeist of the early 90s and the obsession with dark game settings, but this one was especially bleak. I wasn't kidding about the Nazi Scientologists. The Church of Scientology takes over Germany and begins warmongering almost immediately. Just about everywhere is broken, and while the Cold War is over, there's an arms race over the superheroes to use as soldiers, even if there's more superheroes right now than the world needs. That's Underground. It was a product of its time that decided to go even further into the obsession with dark games than its equivalents. The just absolutely nihilistic and almost grotesque setting turned a lot of people off. I say that, and my copy of Marshal Law's Fear and Loathing is falling apart. I've read it so much. The mechanics for the game were mind-boggling complicated, which is another reason why this title is mostly forgotten now. But for a brief time, it was one of the best supported RPGs in its time. Next time, I'm going to go with something a little bit more upbeat, with Margaret Weis's take on the Firefly RPG, only without Season 2. I'm going to try to get this one out a little quicker. Might need to head down to the book stand and see what else they've got in a few weeks for inspiration. So until next time, remember, I hunt heroes. I just haven't found any yet.